Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution.
The Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
I will faithfully execute the Constitution of the United States as a regular citizen. I'm not the president or president-elect, of which we don't have one, not until December 14th anyway. My name is Mark David Smith, and you're watching Contemplating the Constitution. And this is a show where we, as laymen, we are not constitutional supreme understanders. How about that? We're not teachers. We're not anybody that really knows what we're talking about. We just do our research and talk about it. That's why the show is called Contemplating the Constitution and not teaching the Constitution, because all we do is we look over it and, like I said, we research it and talk about it. And who is the we? Oh, we. Hey, we. Oh, where'd you go? There you are. Oh, well, I could talk to you like this, I guess, and we can kind of share a head. It's almost like we share a head there. There we go. No, we're not going to do that. Abigail, oh, hear ye, oh, hear ye, oh, hear ye. This is a little different for you. Usually you have your background and everything else going on, and I can see the light behind. But what's up, Abigail?
Well, we're doing something. We're doing a little change, and we're in the midst of the change. It hasn't happened yet, so I'm trying to improvise.
Okay.
But anyhow, I'm doing my best. But it's changed, but it's going to be different. It will be different because we had some challenges with our green screen, and
really,
you wouldn't know.
What'd you say?
You wouldn't know anything about that, right?
No, I actually wouldn't. I've often said you guys have the best green screen that there is that anybody does on the broadcast. Now, I had it for a long time, but I just couldn't get it to stay, flat and solid and everything. So I just went to my black curtains and I like that. But you guys always have a very good looking green screen.
But it wasn't without issues. I'll just tell you, before the broadcast, there was always a battle between us and the green screen.
Really? Well, me too.
Come on and say everything is fine.
Yeah.
So anyway, we just right now, it may go back to the green screen, but until we can secure it, that's what the whole deal is. Secure.
Sure.
We're getting to know you. I liked where you opened up with saying, we are students of the Constitution, and we are living examples of people who have lived in I'm improvising.
You're being
in the United States of America, where the Constitution is supposed to be implemented. Let's just say that. And for many years, it was respected and everything. And and we did learn about it in school. Maybe not to the depth that we should have.
Right.
But anyhow, I'm so thankful it's being brought up again. I cannot tell you, because of everything that's going on in our United States of America today. So the timing is perfect, Mark.
So what you were actually doing is I started it off at the beginning of the show talking about being layman and not, we don't know all there is to know about the Constitution, and we aren't people that have studied it out and taken many courses on it and teach on it and all that kind of stuff. But then you come on and you added to basically what you were doing was being coefficient.
I knew I was being something.
You are coefficient, and when you're like on Sunday Let Us Reason Together and James is the host and you come in Now, that word coefficient means, and I got it right here in front of me, by the way, means it multiplies what's already in effect.
Woohoo!
That's
a good thing.
coefficient.
That's a good thing.
And so that also is a word used to describe what we're going to talk about today, Clause 18.
Oh my! Wow! Can you believe that? I love that when that happens.
Oh,
no, I mean it. Mark, that's not drama. That's reality.
That's reality.
It is reality with me. I love it when things like that happen because I don't believe in coincidences. And I have to say this much, Mark. I do prepare before I come on any broadcast. I'm just going to let you know. I may not prepare in the same light that you may do, but I do prepare. And I believe that because I do my spiritual preparation, the Spirit works with me and gives me that kind of insight, revelation. And so it works together. It's nice. I think that's what we're supposed to be. I think that's what Messianic lifestyle is all about. Working together. Maybe different perspectives, maybe on a different page, but nonetheless, we're serving the same King, and we're in the same debt. I love it. Thank you for saying that. You have no idea what that did to me just now.
Well, it's so funny. It's you go back to being layman in studying this out, and we are now using this medium here to broadcast, to give out our research and our ideas based on this and what we think it all means based on the life that we live, because we are laymen. It works the same way with Torah. I mean, it's not as though you and I have been to yeshivas and have gone and studied, laid a part of our life aside and done nothing but go in and just study the Torah and be taught by the rabbis and all that kind of stuff. That's not who we are. We are laymen of the Torah, but we live out that Torah, and so by living it, it gives us the ability to relate, living out the Torah, which is our Constitution, by the way. We do adhere to the Constitution of the United States, but we also adhere to the Constitution of the Lord, which is Torah. And because we live that out, now we are actually, I hadn't thought about it until this very moment, but that's the way the Lord works, is we also, on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute, we are contemplating the Torah. So as we are contemplating the Torah, and we come on our different broadcasts, and most of us do several different ones, we are able to, from a different perspective, lay that out. As a layman, we are able to express what we learn and understand. I like that. That's a pretty good way to express it, I think. And that's what we're doing with the Constitution, both the Torah and the Constitution being that which is something that we pattern our lives after and try to do right with, and the Holy One. So hey, that's what it is. So I like it.
I like it. And to me, it just boils it down to two words for the Torah as well as the Constitution: justice and righteousness.
Oh man, don't get me started. My wife says my middle name is Justice.
I know.
I can't handle injustice.
Come on now, we got to face reality.
Come on. We'll bring the Southern lady in here, and that's one of the number one expressions down in the South. Come on with it. Come on. You get to go. Come on with it. Let's do it. Go to any gospel church where they get a passion. You get the preacher to preach. Come on, preacher. Come on.
Come on. Amen.
Hi, Sherry.
There's one other too that said, yep, yeah. Or so I forget.
Oh yeah.
I
Well,
went to Catholic church when I was a
yeah.
kid.
Oh
You didn't
well.
speak.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it is.
Come on, preach it. Preach it. Tell us.
Well, good morning there, Sherry Flanagan. How art
That's
thou?
encouraging them.
Oh yeah. There we go. All
I'm
right.
breathing.
Well, we're Abigail's being coefficient today, and
Abigail is coefficient every day.
that's right. That's right.
That's my middle name, coefficient.
That's right. Well, except except on the hidden voice of Adasa, which you just lay it all out there. There's nothing to be coefficient about. You're just efficient. You know, so
You know something? But let me tell you something, Mark. Even on the hidden voice of Adasa, I have to be coefficient with my king. And
there you go.
because
Good.
she only did what was right in the eyes of the king.
Good.
I only do what's right in the eyes of the king. So I'm coefficient with him.
There you go. There you go.
Together.
I like it. I like it. All right. Well, now that we've established all that, let's be efficient here and get on with our Constitution show. And I'm going to present my research that I've looked at over this. And today we are on the last clause of Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, which is the last clause. And that's what we do here is we go one by one and we do the research on it and bring it to you. Now, if I remember right, Sherry has mentioned in a past episode sometime that I really didn't understand until I got here, but haven't you mentioned the necessary and proper clause before? Do you remember anything about that? That the elastic clause it's called the coefficient clause and the elastic clause. Have you not brought that up? Do you remember or not? Or Sherry?
I get my children's names confused.
Oh, well then, okay.
But, it is it was highly contested.
Yeah.
And they say it's one of the most important and the most controversial clauses in the Constitution.
It is, yes.
Did you want to read it first so people?
Oh no, I've got all my research. I'm going to go through it, and you're welcome to be coefficient and add to that or multiply what's already in effect as I go through it. Let me go ahead and read it, and then people can get an idea. And let me get started. And once again, as always, both of you guys can just interrupt and come in and add to whatever I'm saying and give examples and or whatever we need to do. But okay, let's do that. Clause 18, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. The Congress shall have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. Now, basically, in all capital letters, it is the necessary and proper clause is the official designation that if you looked up necessary and proper clause, you'd get massive amounts of articles on this. And once again, as I've already brought up, but let me reemphasize, sometimes called the coefficient, which means to multiply what's already in effect clause, or the elastic. The definition of elastic is able to resume its normal shape after simultaneously, able to resume its normal shape simultaneously after contraction, dilation, which is that of making it go a lot of different ways, or distortion, able to encompass variety and change, flexible and adaptable clause. So the elastic clause, and it is an enlargement, not a constriction of the powers expressly granted to Congress. This is not Congress just saying, because all the different articles and clauses all start off with the Congress shall have the power to. Just because it says that doesn't mean we're giving ourselves the power. It literally is the powers expressly granted to Congress. This is voted in. This is made up. This is one of those things that, let's just say you're starting a government. You've gone away from your government. You found some land and you want to start your own country and you want to start a government. We need to put together a bunch of laws, being the Constitution. And in that Constitution, we have to set forth who has the power to do what needs to be done, because this is the real key. What needs to be done? Well, at this time right now, we're not really going to know 200 years from now what's really progressing, because time right now is progressing. So let's put a clause in there, clause in there that will help us to expand, contract, or work along with all the other laws that we've already set up. And that's what this Clause 18 is. It's that elastic clause. It's the one where we can push the limits, but once we've pushed them, we'll bounce right back to where we were originally, meaning that we basically go back to the original. Even though we contemplate and add and subtract, multiply and divide the Constitution as we go along, because we have to. That's what all the amendments are about and everything else that's been added to the Constitution. We still need to be a little bit elastic in this, in understanding who has the power over what. And so this clause was put in here basically as that understanding. And another thing too is you can be as negative as you want against the government of the United States, but if you are going to live here in the United States, it is my opinion that we do need to have a government set up or an institution set up that is working for the people, basically, but can make these decisions. And of course, Abigail Sherry and I disagree on a lot of different things. We agree on a lot of things, but we disagree on a lot of things. So we can't just leave it to the individual people or even just the president to make decisions on things. That's why we have Congress. That's why we have the House of Representatives, the senators, the governors, the states, all of that kind of thing. That's why we have it all put together like that, so that they can make these decisions. But once again, life is going to progress. And as it progresses, we need to be able to progress with it or be elastic with it. And that's what this clause is giving Congress the ability to do. Just to give an example here, taking it back to the 1700s, Chief Justice Marshall, who is the longest serving Chief Justice ever, the fourth longest serving justice in Supreme Court history, widely regarded as one of the most influential justices to ever sit on the Supreme Court. And prior to joining the Supreme Court, Marshall served as the United States Secretary of State under President John Adams. and he was the Secretary of State during the time that this clause was being set up. When asked about what he thought of this type of clause, he said, "Let the end be legitimate. Let it be within the scope of the Constitution, and all means which are appropriate, which are plainly adapted to that end, which are not prohibited, but consistent with the letter and spirit of the Constitution, are constitutional." So, once again, I think this says it all. Let it be done because it needs to be done. It is necessary and proper to make this clause, yet let it stay constitutional. So no matter what decision they have to make that's outside of the Constitution, let it be based on the Constitution. I like that. I like that a lot. That's a good statement. All right. Moving on. Let's see. Provisions give the provisions within this gives Congress a share in the responsibilities lodged in other departments by virtue of its right to enact legislation necessary to carry into execution all powers vested in the national government. Where necessary for the efficient execution of its own powers, Congress may delegate some measure of legislative power to other departments. And that really is what the Constitution is all about. Practically, every power of the national government has been expanded in some degree by this necessary and proper clause. According to the Articles of Confederation, each state, now each state retains some degree of understanding within this clause. Each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this confederation expressly delegated. The Continental Congress, this clause not only gives Congress this elastic clause, but it gives the states the elastic clause also. The Continental Congress had no powers incidentally to those expressed delegated by the Articles of the Confederation. That's why we needed the Constitution. By contrast, the necessary and proper clause expressly confers incidental powers upon Congress, which no other clause in the Constitution does by itself. So no individual clause, amendment, article in the Constitution gives express right to expand unless you have this clause by itself. Interesting. I mean, this is lawyer stuff here, buddy. This is lawyers. I love this stuff. The draft.
I think what alarmed people was it who says what's necessary. That was the big deal. That's what's necessary and proper. Who decides that? So it was the ambiguity of, I was saying that wrong, and the ambiguity of the phrase. If I'm going to use a $10 word, I guess I better know how to. Yeah. It's the ambiguity of the phrase necessary and proper that really alarmed people. And
still does.
Yes, it still does. And Hamilton, of course, wrote Federalist 33, but we can get into that later.
I have that in my notes. I'm going to give some people's definition of what they think it is later on. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, he just, to me, he made two really good arguments. Now, in the Federalist 33, he was actually defending two articles. He was defending this one, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, that granted Congress the authority to make laws necessary for proper carrying out of its powers, actually. Article 6, Clause 2, which said that the national law would be the supreme law of the land. So both of those together alarmed people. So Hamilton addressed that, and he made some really good points, just common sense points. You know, you have to have a functioning government, was his argument. And so the government, the national government has to be able to have the ability to pass legislation, to make laws. Otherwise, if they couldn't make laws, then they would just be states formed by a treaty instead of a country or a constitution. And that was the difference. So you have to have the power to be able to do what is necessary to use that power. So that's where he was going with that, which I thought was really good, you know. And then the point that he make, that the national government didn't have the power to enact binding legislation that would be on the states, then the states wouldn't be bound as a nation. They would just be bound by a treaty, which there is a difference. A treaty is like, it's a consent agreement between two parties, but you can break that anytime.
Exactly, in between different people, right?
Yeah, so that was the two really good common sense things that he put in there, which I thought was really good.
Well, let me go back to you're saying who decides what's necessary. I think that's why it is the necessary and proper clause. It's not just the necessary clause. It's not just the proper clause. And what in my personal understanding by going through all this, the word necessary, it has to do with what is happening with our country right now. Yes. Okay, that's what's necessary. Yes. The proper part of it is the consensus of those voting on what the change must be and what is necessary. It's also an understanding of who decides what's necessary. What's necessary is what's going to affect the country. If it's not going to affect the entire country, it's not necessary. It needs to be understood and taken care of by the individuals it's going to affect. But if it's going to affect the entire country, that's what Congress is all about. And that's the necessary part of it. It will affect the entire country. So the necessary being what's happening now to the entire country. And we're talking about back in the 1800s, the 1900s, right now, and what's in the future. They will also look at what's happening to the country in the future at that time and see if they need to make a proper designation based on the consensus of people. Proper is only going to be, it's not who decides, it's all of them decide. See? And that's it's like the Electoral College. You know, it's not the people that decide, it's the consensus of all of them that decide. So I don't know if that's a good example or not, but
it's a very good example, because that's what we see going on right now.
Yeah, that's the necessary and proper thing right there.
That's why Trump and them are going to the legislatures of the states.
I understand.
Because they're presenting all this evidence that whoever side you're on, I mean, this is what they're doing. They're presenting the evidence that there has been a lot of hanky-panky stuff going on.
Right.
And they're telling the legislatures they have the right under the Constitution to appoint the electors that they want. I mean, the states hold a lot of power. It's just never really been called on as much, I think, under these circumstances and everything.
Right.
So that's why they're, and that comes under this, that they could justly resist the national government and hold them accountable for attempting to usurp the rights of the legislation. I mean, there's all
right.
that going on.
Right. So that's a good, necessary, and proper example of what's going on right now. Okay. So you mentioned Hamilton. I'm going to give a few other people. I'd mentioned Chief Justice Marshall before. The Anti-Federalist expressed concern that the clause would grant the federal government boundless power, so he was against it. Federalists argued that the clause would permit only execution of powers that had been granted by the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton and James Madison both said without the clause, the Constitution would be a dead letter. They were so for it because they saw into the future. Whereas, for instance, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists were only about right now and what was in front of their face. So they didn't want that overall power right now. They couldn't see into the future. Patrick Henry said the clause would lead to limitless federal power, which would inevitably menace individual liberty. He was not looking to the fact of what I said before. The necessary part of it had to do with the entire country. Patrick Henry was looking at individual self-contained units that needed to take care of their own thing. The federal government, the Congress that has to do with the overall nation doesn't have anything to do with those little things, and that's what Patrick Henry was about. So under the authority granted it by that clause, Congress has adopted measures to discharge the treaty obligations of the nation. My mouth is so dry today. To organize the federal judicial system, and has enacted a large body of law defining and punishing crimes. So, once again, this boils down to the overall and not individual, in my opinion. Going on, effective control of the national economy has been made possible by the authority to regulate the internal commerce of the state to the extent necessary to protect and promote interstate commerce. Once again, the nation as a whole and not individual. The right of Congress to use all known and appropriate means for collecting revenue, including the distraint of property and for federal taxes. These are federal taxes. It has nothing to do. Each state takes care of their own state taxes. Congress has to do with the overall federal taxes and to exercise the power of eminent domain, which we talked about, to acquire property for public use. We talked about that last week, as a matter of fact, when we talked about Congress having being able to take specific places, but that's the overall land of the United States. They can go in and take that federally. All this has greatly extended the range of national power. Although the only crimes which Congress is expressly authorized to punish are piracies. Now, these are things that we've talked about in past. I thought this was real interesting. This little part of this is it goes back to say that Congress has the power, but every one of the individual clauses within Article 1, Section 8 has talked about these individual things, which Congress has the power over, which this clause gives them power to expand those individual clauses. So it says piracies, felonies on the high seas, offenses against laws of nations, treason, and counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. Its power to create, define, and punish crimes and offenses whenever necessary to effectuate the objects of the federal government is universally conceded. So once again, each one of those things listed right there are clauses we've talked about within Section 8. One of the examples of this is offenses which have been punished under this power are the alteration of registered bonds, the bringing of counterfeit bonds into the country, conspiracy to injure prisoners in custody of a United States Marshal, impersonation of a federal officer with intent to defraud, conspiracy to injure a citizen in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured by the Constitution or laws of the United States, the receipt by government officials of contributions from government employees or political purposes, and advocating the overthrow of the government by force. Interesting to me, each one of those different things right there listed are things that have already been brought to the courts, but not covered specifically under any constitutional laws, any amendments or anything like that. None of these have been covered by that. But because you have this clause in the Constitution, it gave Congress the ability to punish, to try and punish these different offenses. See, that's the outline that they were looking at when they put together the Constitution. The fact that we're not going to be able to think of everything. We're not going to be able to just sit down, and even though there's a whole bunch of us here doing this, we're not going to be able to come up with everything to make constitutional laws about. So we have to have a coefficient elastic clause in there to help us to expand on what we're doing. I thought this was really good to have the example of the offenses that were, brought out by this clause. Another part of this clause, which I didn't really understand by just reading the clause, but because it gives the government the ability to regulate the monies and the coin and everything within different articles of the Constitution, especially these past 17 clauses within Section 8, is the chartering of banks, which gives Congress the power to incorporate banks and kindred institutions, which is like different institutions, like dang it, I had it in my head. It's not a bank, but you have different
Federal Reserve.
Yeah, not just Federal Reserve, but I mean private institutions that people can invest their money. Different things like that, like Edward Jones, things like that.
Federal Reserve is not a bank, by the way.
No, I know. That's why I said not the
By
Federal
the
Reserve.
Rothschilds, the Morgans, the I forget, Rockefeller.
I get that. That's why I'm saying banks and kindred institutions.
Yeah,
that's not a kindred institution. More like investment banks, that type of thing.
yeah.
They incorporate these things as an appropriate means for executing the great powers to lay and collect taxes, to borrow money, to regulate commerce, to declare and conduct a war, and to raise and support armies. Once again, everything listed right there is also listed within Article 1, Section 8, and all the different clauses that we've covered in the past. Moreover, it may confer upon them private powers, which, standing alone, have no relation to the functions of the federal government, if those privileges are essential to the effective operation of such corporations. So we're talking about banks here, giving Congress the privilege, the power to regulate these different things. So if you're a bank, investment company, and you want to set up something that's not really covered under law, you would have to go through Congress to make sure that those things are set up right. And that, I think, is why we see so many investment companies going before the courts, state courts and federal courts and things like that, because they're trying to do things outside of the Constitution. And this clause gives gives Congress the power to regulate those things. Once again, things I had never thought about before. Let's see, the state banks. Congress may authorize national banks to perform trustee functions. The court will not undertake to assess the relative importance of the public and private functions of a financial institution Congress has seen fit to create. So, in other words, a state bank has all their power to regulate their bank, but Congress sets up the laws. The state cannot set up its own laws when it comes to banks. An example of this, it sustained the act setting up in the federal farm loan banks to provide funds for mortgage loans on agricultural land, against the contention of the right of the Secretary of Treasury to use these banks as depositories of public funds was merely a pretext for chartering those banks for private purposes. So one of the things that this clause gave Congress the ability to do was come against the Secretary of Treasury, who was using banks as depositories of public funds and for private purposes. And that's something that was I don't know. I saw all the court proceedings on that, but I didn't go into the details of it. Interesting. I didn't know about that. Okay, so reinforced and necessary by the necessary and proper clause, the powers to lay and collect taxes, to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, and to borrow money on the credit of the United States, and to coin money and regulate. Once again, we have talked about this in past articles. In clauses here in Section 8. Let me get through a couple of things here. In addition to creation of banks, Congress has been held to have authority to charter a railroad corporation or a corporation to construct an interstate bridge as instrumentalities for promoting commerce among the states, and to create corporations to manufacture aircraft or merchant vessels as incidental to the war power. So what this is saying is, because of this clause, Congress can actually go in and create businesses that will promote commerce among the states, and also create corporations that manufacture aircraft, merchant vessels, things that can be used for military purposes as incidental to the war power. So this clause gives them the right to actually start businesses, to raise them up and use the banks to fund businesses that will help out the military part of our nation here. I thought was real interesting, because I didn't know Congress could actually do that, but they can actually set up businesses under that is regulated, but also owned by the national government, which is real interesting. Okay. Well, I can see that in that you could have private businesses that build, for instance, ships, and I know that there are private businesses, but it makes me wonder. Sorry, I didn't do more research on this, but it kind of makes me wonder how many of the aircraft companies that make jets and things for the military are owned by private companies or owned by our United States government, or that the government could actually just go in and take them. I don't know, and have rules and regulations over them. I'm not familiar with that, but by what this is, how this is worded, they can start their own businesses or even take over businesses. So interesting on that. Okay, courts and judicial proceedings. Because the Constitution delineated only the great outlines of the judicial power, leaving the details to Congress, the distribution and appropriate exercise of the judicial power must be made by laws passed by Congress. So what they're saying is that Congress has that only judicial power here, which is basically outlined already in other proceedings, but this clause gives them the ability to expand upon that, I guess is what I'm understanding here. Congress may direct the removal from a state to a federal court of a criminal prosecution against a federal officer for acts done under federal law. So if somebody has committed a crime in a state, the state is in the process of that, taking that to court, Congress can come in and make that a federal. And we see the FBI, which is the federal government, going into different states and taking control. The states have the right to take that back if they need to. And I know that's under certain instances, but that's the only example I can think of under this. Let me go through here. I'm almost done. Sorry, I hope this is not too boring, but I'm trying to go through there's so much on this that I tried to only pick out parts where I could talk about, where we could talk about. Okay, when a territory is admitted as a state, Congress may designate the court to which the records of the territorial courts shall be transferred and may prescribe the mode for enforcement and review of judgments rendered by those courts. Interesting. A lot of this stuff here that I've left in is things that we've covered in different clauses that we've talked about. I guess that's a shameless plug to go back and watch our other constitutional shows. All right. Let's see. The necessary and proper clause enabled. I'm almost done here. I'm on the last couple of paragraphs. Hey, yay. The necessary and proper clause enables Congress to pass special laws to require other departments of the government to prosecute or adjudicate particular claims, which asserted by the government itself or by private persons. In 1924, Congress adopted a joint resolution directing the president to cause for the cancellation of certain oil leases alleged to have been obtained by the government by fraud, and to prosecute other such actions and proceedings. Interesting. Congress, this gives them the power to delegate, is what I'm seeing here, even to the president. Maritime law. Congress may implement the admiralty and maritime jurisdiction conferred under the federal courts. Let's see. Okay, to end it all up, once again, I'm kind of scanning here because a lot of this stuff was just covered by things that we've already talked about. So, summing it up, the so-called elastic clause, is the basis for all the legislative branch's implied powers not explicitly listed in the Constitution, but held to be legitimate because they are necessary and proper for the Congress to exercise the other powers that are listed here. So basically what that's saying to me is that all the laws are set up, this gives Congress the right to exercise other powers outside of that. Over time, this clause has been used to justify a gradual expansion in the general power of Congress and the entire federal government. So, I said a lot of things just to say the simple thing that this clause is put in here to help expand what we have in our country federally overall. I think the number one thing that I'm learning, especially now that we're done with Article 1, Section 8 and all the different clauses, the one thing that I'm learning here is that Congress has explicit power over the whole. Okay. Now, the states individually, the local governments, like city, you go federally, you go state, county, and then local city governments like that. Each one of them have their own regulations. And even Sherry was talking about, something earlier that is more local than a federal law, that type of thing. And what we're learning is what Congress can do overall as a whole, and individually each different thing that it can take care of. The Constitution, states have their own Constitution and they have their own laws, which once again trickle down. But this is something I guess I knew, but I didn't bring to the forefront of my understanding, is how separated we can be and still work together as a federal government, but also as state and local communities. So that's about all I have on that. So any interjections or anything? I see we have a lot of people in the chat that are giving their ideas here, and I let everybody know I don't read the chat while we're talking. It's way too much of a distraction, and I can easily get off course by looking at the chat. So anybody want to interject anything?
Yeah, I'd like to say something, Mark. It's interesting. Unfortunately, where we are today, it's not the same situation as it was when this was written up, because number one, people they're really not taking the Constitution seriously. Number two is, James and I did a little, and I'm talking the people that are elected. They're more concerned about their constituents than they are of expediting the Constitution in the right way. It is just a totally different mindset than it was when Hamilton and the guys got together.
Right.
It's just a different world we're living in. And that's where we have challenges. That's where we have challenges because, this country, as you know, and everybody knows, was based on Judeo-Christian principles. And a lot of the mindset of the people that were putting this together had a foundation of the word in them, to a degree, more so than they have it today. So when I sit back and I watch the Congress at work, I listen to what they're saying today, and I'm like, where is your heart? What are you thinking? Because I just, I think this, Congress should be objective in their, making decisions. I mean, you can't help but have a little bit of your subjectivity into it, but you should be objective concerning the law of the land. And unfortunately, they're more subjective. And we've seen it happen just recently, in the day that we're living in. Expediting the law of Obamacare, which they did something that they shouldn't have done because they took it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is not there to make laws. It's also to expedite, to enforce the law. And one of the justices, the Supreme Justice, actually added that, he made a law and he wasn't supposed to do that. He really went above and beyond what he was supposed to do regarding Obamacare. And then another thing was, there was many of them. I mean, I just remember that people weren't expediting the law according to the Constitution. And Bob Hall made an interesting statement that President Trump is trying to, I love this, he's trying to restore the Constitution back into the Congress so that the Constitution is actually being used as leverage as to what they can and cannot do. And one area that I worked in for years was the collective bargaining concerning that aspect of the Constitution with this particular section, which had to do with the workforce. It had to do with unions. It had to do with workers' comp and all that kind of legal stuff. How they would work with the different states and defining a law concerning that. And it depends on what state you're in that they can manipulate that too. It's not a one size fits all. So I just think, unfortunately, I hate it where we are today. People aren't agreeing with each other. People don't have the same vision. They have their own agenda. And it would be great if they recognize what we were talking about when we first came on the air, that, we are Torah people. We look at the Word of God as law, which it is. And we're on this journey of living that life according to the Constitution of the Torah. We're on a journey. When we haven't arrived, we're all on different levels. But it's like when I look at the Constitution of the United States of America and the people who are supposed to be using the Constitution as a means of their decision, I very seldom hear anybody use the Constitution. The only one person I heard really use it in a way that I took a deep breath was our new judge in the Supreme Court, Judge Amy. She really, she was, and so wasn't Kavanaugh. I shouldn't say but Judge Amy just really put it to the point was, I am going to deal with myself when a case comes up. I'm not going to let my own subjective reasoning have an influence on making decisions. This is the judge in the Supreme Court, Amy. She wouldn't even answer questions that were hypothetical. She said, I can't answer that question because that would put me in a light of, I haven't read it. I don't know anything about it. So she took it seriously is what I'm saying. She took the Constitution seriously. She took the law seriously, and she respected Congress. She said, you're the ones that are supposed to make the law. And then it comes to us to decide, whether it has been properly, the case has been properly analyzed. So anyhow, I when I hear this right here, I'm so thankful you're bringing it up. But I really see that we all in the United States of America, we need desperately for our elected officials to take it seriously. And to me, it grieves my heart when I see that. That's why things are doing what's happening right now. Things are not. Where's the law? Things are just lawless. They really are. It's terrible. It's just. I'm amazed that. We're doing okay right now, but if it keeps going in this direction, where there's no law, people aren't even recognizing the law and enforcing the law. I'm talking Congress now, and they're just kind of like. They don't even recognize what the Constitution says. I think that it's not a safe place for the United States of America. Really, we need a law. We need the Torah, but we need also the law of the Constitution. That's all I have to say about it. Because I was reading all these, the collective bargaining part of it. And I was like, I used to be a part of that workers' comp part of it when I worked. I had some aspect of that with the job I did. And it was, you had to, you had to deal with it according to the law. As much as you wanted to have compassion and mercy, you do have compassion and mercy, but you had to have your ducks in order before it could be expedited. And so anyhow, I just think we need to be more disciplined, and our Congress needs to be more disciplined. And I think it's up to us. We, the people, need to vote the right people in the Congress.
I wonder how many of our officials, people in different offices, are scared of people like us that do shows like this, that bring the Constitution to the forefront and talk about these things and, reason them out. Of course, they don't know I'm sure they don't have any idea in the world that we're doing this show. Not that we're really making that much of an impact on it, but I wonder how many of them are scared of people actually going in and studying out and learning what the original Constitution was all about. If they're wanting to bypass any part of the Constitution and make it up themselves, which is kind of what you're talking about, there is, if I was a politician, I wouldn't want people learning about the Constitution, as much. I don't know. I honestly, when it comes to the news, I get my news from Messianic Lamb Radio. So, I only hear the parts that you guys want me to hear, because I don't have the ability to discern what's right and what's wrong when it comes to the news, what's being told right and wrong. So anyway,
the algorithms are, they are watching us. They are listening to what we're saying, and it's coming out, and that's where we have yeah, hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Go to algorithms. Al Gore was
algorithms.
Everybody say zinc. I don't know. Somebody said say zinc. It drives them crazy. I don't know what that is.
Zinc. Yeah, it's a vitamin.
I know, but they say something. If you say zinc and you're on YouTube, it does something. I don't know.
Well, thanks, Sherry, Sherry, for saying that then, and getting us noticed. I appreciate that. Thanks a million.
And I'm thankful, Mark. I'm thankful that we are doing it, because someone has to be a voice of righteousness. Someone has to do it, because to me, I think it carries more weight than we realize. And I'm not concerned about the worst thing that can happen is we'll have to go to another network.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that's not going to happen. I've expressed very severely that that is a detriment. We want to maintain what we have. I don't want to go somewhere else. But I wish that we had, both of you are very good at expressing what and you guys know a lot about this stuff. I just wish that there was somebody that could apply what we're talking about a little bit better, maybe to what's really going on. But anyway, so
can I give you an example of this thing?
Sure. Few minutes. I really have to leave at the top of the hour, so
okay. We'll take just a minute. We all know about the horrible Roe versus Wade. That was a federal. Right. Well, a lot of the states have enacted laws against abortion, different varying things, and they always try to take it up to the Supreme Court and to get it overturned. And because of Roe versus Wade. Well, the whole thing is that was the issue, is states make their own laws. and they have used the Constitution to try to have abortion federally mandated because they're saying it's prejudicial against women. Well, what about prejudicial against the baby? But that's another issue. But what I'm saying is they use that to get it federally mandated where they already had laws in the individual states for it or against it. So everybody's having a hissy fit about it could possibly be overturned, but all that would do is send it right back to the law of the states. What states have laws that allow it? And you got the, what was it, New Jersey, that they passed that law of abortion there, that like you could kill babies, I think after the womb, and they all stood and applauded it and all that. I wouldn't be in those people's feet and then their shoes in their feet, in their shoes for all the tea in China, and China's got a lot of tea because they're going to have to stand before God Almighty one day. But see, they don't believe in God, so they don't think there's any retribution. And anytime you start getting away from God, then you have a loss of respect for life. And that's what happened. But but it's very interesting. We'll keep a watch on how things go about these elections, because I've listened to some of the Trump team going to the legislatures. What was the one, Nevada, that hastened to certify their election so they could get that Democrat seated in Congress. That's what that was all about. But I mean, the guy in the legislature, I was very impressed. I mean, he was quoting the Bible and he was quoting it in context. So I'm going, wow. So the legislature, I think, in some of these states, after they listen to the evidence that Giuliani and the people are presenting, and they have a constitutional lawyer there telling them what they can do as states in the elector. So it's going to be very interesting how God works this out. Because I know this country repented. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off track. The reason why people don't know things is because they took civics out of the classroom. When I was a kid, they made it social studies. Well, then they turned social studies into behavioral of people and all this kind of stuff. So now we had to pass American history, which had our government and stuff in it. So, but they just dumbed down the people so they could come in and take control. And that's exactly what it's all about. So this show is wonderful because so many people can tune into this, going by article, section, discussing what it means. Great for homeschoolers, great for kids that are going to school. Sometimes you have to unwash their brain that they've been brainwashed. So with what they've been taught, no, this is what this said, and that's not right. There was some child that got an F for standing up saying what it said, and the teacher was giving her an F, and we're like, we don't, they didn't care. What she's saying is right. So you give her an F. Oh, well, she'll get over it. She would get it over it too. But, just a little kid standing up for what's right. But she says, no, this is what the Constitution said. That's wrong. What do you read the Constitution for? Because her parents are smart.
And it's interesting, Sherry, that you brought that up, because yesterday, and I know I've been listening to the interviews too with the people that experienced being in the in the voting places, and when they heard the people, now here are the constituents, when they heard the people speak out against it, when the voices of the people came out and spoke strongly against it, it really appeared that people started to wake up. It's one thing to hear the Giuliani and the lawyers and whatnot, but when you hear it coming from the voice of the people who actually experienced it, there is evidence. And that's why I say hallelujah for Messianic Lamb Network, because we are the voice of the people. We're voices of the people, the human race. And we see things through the eyes of light. We see things through the eyes of the creator of heaven and earth. And we have faith, not fear. And that's what I saw happening. The people that have fear are the ones that are making wrong choices because of fear and power over them.
Very true.
The ones that have faith are standing strong because we're standing with the creator of heaven and earth, and he's with us. And so that's the difference. And I love it. You can hear those voices of faith coming forth, not fear. And one of the lawyers, one of the women that came as one person that came as a whistleblower, he had terrible things happen to him physically after he was a whistleblower. But they still stand strong. They're saying, I'm doing this for the United States of America. I'm doing this for we the people. And that's what needs to happen in our life. We need to be strong and of good courage, just like what Moses said to Joshua crossing over. Fear not.
And the legislature guys applauded the people for coming forward because one of them actually, if I'm remembering correctly, said that made a difference, that it wasn't just them, it was people that were there and saw it. And then that guy that did that analysis of how the votes came in, and I mean, he showed it. He said it should be a smooth curve of the votes coming in, and you had a huge spike of about 600,000 votes hitting at one time. He said it's impossible for those machines to calculate that. And then Giuliani asked him, he said, is it possible to separate the Trump votes from the Biden votes? And he said, yes. He said, how many votes did Biden get? And he said 500 and some odd thousand. He said, how many did Trump get? Said 3,200. That's way out of line. There's no way. It's mathematically impossible for what these things are. And I mean, they're presenting it in several states like that. It's crazy.
There's a million stories. We could go through a million different stories, but we won't because this show is over. Thank you guys.
I watch the legislatures. Let's see what God does. You know, it's all up to him. He says peace to the storm.
Amen. Thank you, ladies, for your input. I hope we covered some good ground today. Next week, we will start with Article 1, Section 9, the migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1808, but a tax or duty may be imposed on such importation not exceeding $10 for each person. Well, we'll see where that goes. Sounds like
it's
immigration to me.
Down, not $10.
Yeah, you got me. I don't know. We'll see where that goes. All right. I do know what's coming up this coming Sunday on December 6th is the the next installment of Keeping Focus in Distracting Times, number 7. We're comparing the days of the Maccabees to the present day and all the different distractions thereof. And so join us this coming Sunday. As a matter of fact, here's a little bit more info on that. The Messianic Lamb Video Network presents Keeping Focus in Distracting Times, number 7. This coming Sunday, December 6th, will be our very special Hanukkah edition. We will be comparing the distractions in the day of the Maccabees to the distractions found in the present day. Visit the New Lamb Network website at messianiclambnetwork.com to find start times in your time zone and the speakers. The Messianic Lamb Video Network presents Keeping Focus in Distracting Times, number 7, special Hanukkah edition, December 6th, 2020. Sherry, are you posting that?
Abigail will be with us, and
yeah.
Mark,
Aren't you hosting?
Daryl, and
Sure.
Melena, and
Yeah.
Joe,
James, Joe
Cam-
Cameron, Anita Moshe, all of us will
got a
be
good
there.
lineup. So
Well, Abigail and James are going to give a brief history leading up to the Maccabees, and then Daryl's going to give a brief story about the Maccabees, and then we'll just discuss it, take it one by one. So that starts noon Eastern time. You figure out your other times, or just go to MessianicLambNetwork.com and check out the Keeping Focus page. It'll give you all the information on all of us, the start times, all of that kind of stuff. It's right there. And we'll see y'all next week on Contemplating the Constitution. Bye, ladies.
Shalom. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States. So help me God.